Okay, welcome to lesson 14. We continue with while loop. Let's be happy because we are learning how to use while loop. So I'm drawing some lines here. So this is the action, drawing lines. So how many lines? I don't know. So I can draw lines till I get tired. So I want to repeat a process without any condition. So I can continue to infinity, or I can continue till I get tired. So we will be discussing infinite loop. So look, I can continue drawing lines because we want to talk about infinite loops. So you can repeat a process infinitely many times, and there is no condition to stop your infinite loop. Sometimes they're good, but sometimes they are dangerous, and you should be careful. If you don't know how to manage them, how to handle them, they are dangerous. But if you want to create something, let's say you want to make a game, most probably you will need to use infinite loop. But remember, you have to know how to handle infinite loops before using them. Now let's have one example. Total equals 0, our variable. We have counter equals 0, n equals int, input, and we have while counter less than or equal to n, and here total plus equal counter. So probably you know what's happening here. We want to find sum of numbers from 0 to n. So this is our box, and the label is total. So initially we don't have anything inside the box, so 0. And then in each iteration you add something to the box, or you update the value of total. Now let's say n equals 4. So we want to find sum of numbers from 0 to 4. And both of them are inclusive. It means you have to include both of them, 0 and 4. So let's say we have 0, the value of counter less than or equal to 4. Is it true? Yes, this one is true. Total plus equal counter. So you add 0 to total, it becomes 0. Still 0. And then you go back here, you have 0 less than or equal to 4. Is it true? Yes, this one is true. Total plus equal counter. Still 0. You go back to void statement, 0 less than or equal to 0, less than or equal to 4, sorry. Total plus equal counter, still 0. So you can see, we can continue to infinity. 0 less than or equal to 4, 0 less than or equal to 4. So this is an infinite loop. But do we have a way to stop the while loop? Yes, you can terminate the while loop using some statements or one statement to make this condition false. But let's keep this one as it is to have an infinite loop. So let's have two notes about infinite loop. They never terminate, or they eventually terminate with a system error. So maybe something happens and then that event terminates the infinite loop. So be careful about these two. They never terminate, or they terminate with a system error. Now let's have one example about infinite loop. One more example, let's say s equals 0, counter equals 0, while counter less than or equal to s, and equals int input s plus equal n. So what's happening here, we have n, which is user input, and then we add it to s. And then we take another user input, we add it to s. So we want to find some of n numbers taken from the user. So this is our box, empty box s. Initially we don't have anything inside the box. It's 0, and then we have this variable counter here. So is it an infinite loop? At first glance, yes, it seems we have an infinite loop. But let's see, maybe we don't have. So in order to find out, you have to try different inputs. So let's say n equals 5. And before user input, we have counter less than or equal to s. 0 less than or equal to s. S is 0. So this one is true, n equals 5. So we have taken 5 from the user. We add it to s. S becomes 5. Now we have to go back to while statement. Now we have to check the condition again. What is the value of counter? It is 0. 0 less than or equal to, what is s? 5. Is it true? Yes, this one is true. 0 is less than or equal to 5. We take another number, let's say 10. You add it to s becomes 15. Again, you go back. 0 less than or equal to 15. Is it true? Yes, this one is true. So be careful about this part. We have int. So it means we can take integers from the user. And integers consist of negative numbers and positive numbers. We have 0, minus 1, minus 2, to minus infinity. Here we have 1, 2, to plus infinity. So here, n equals, this time let's say, minus 20. It's totally valid. This is an integer, no problem. Now we have to add minus 20 to s. S becomes minus 5. Now let's go back to while. Counter less than or equal to s. Counter is 0, 0 less than or equal to minus 5. Is it true? No, this one is not true. So is it an infinite loop? No, this is not not an infinite loop. Not an infinite loop if we have both positive and negative numbers. So as you can see here, we have 5, 10, minus 20. Positive numbers and negative numbers. So this is not an infinite loop. How to make this one an infinite loop? If you have only positive numbers. So let me write it here. To have infinite loop, we can have only positive numbers. So in this case, you will have an infinite loop because 0 will be always less than or equal to 0. Now let's have another example. Counter equals 0 while counter greater than or equal to 0. Print counter, and let's increase the value of counter by 1. Is it always 1? No, you can increase the value of counter by 1,000, 1 billion, 10. So we don't have any rule about this one. But here, let's increase the value of counter by 1. Now let's see if we have an infinite loop or a normal loop. Let's start from the condition. 0 greater than or equal to 0. 0 is not greater than 0, but 0 equals 0. Yes, this one is true. Print counter. You print 0, the value of counter. And then counter becomes 1. Let me write it here. Counter equals 0. And then counter becomes 1. Now you go back to while statement. 1 greater than or equal to 0. Is it true? Yes, this one is true. You print the value of counter. And then counter plus equal 1, counter becomes 2. You go back to while. 2 less than or equal to 0. This is also true. You print 2. You increase the value of counter, counter becomes 3. 3 greater than or equal to 0. This one is true, you print 3. So as you can see here, this number or the value of counter is increasing, always increasing. So that number will be always greater than or equal to 0. And there is no way to stop or terminate this while loop. So this is indeed an infinite loop. It never terminates. Or maybe something happens with the system and then boom, this while loop terminates. But now you can say this is an infinite loop. Let's have one more example. This one is a nice example. While true n equals int input. Let's have a bunch of statements here. Some statements we don't know. So I'm sure this one is familiar to you. It's a Boolean value, right? True or false. So while true, this is basically the result of a condition or some conditions. So you have a Boolean expression and then the result is true or the result is false. In this case, in this example, the result is true. So we have while true, it's always true. There is no way to change this one. There is no way to make this one false. Of course, we can write something here to terminate while loop, but I'm not going to discuss this one here. Let's talk about the condition. Let's focus on the Boolean value. There is no way to change this one to make it false, because here we have the word true, the Boolean value true. So there is no way to change this one, and you just take some inputs from the user till infinity. So this is, again, an infinite loop, because the condition is always, true. Do we have something else instead of true to be written here? Yeah, we have. You can say, let me change the color to green. You can say while 1 n equals int input. So this one here is equivalent to true here. So true or 1. So that was all for this lesson. Next lesson, we will be discussing indefinite loop and definite loop. So as usual, take care and bye-bye.